Case 003, The Hole in the Attic. Welcome back. I hope you're all finding my case files interesting. This case takes place only a week after my run-in with the Shadow Man. Lily had been put on a secret assignment, which wasn't entirely unusual for her. Psychics and telepaths were difficult to come by, so she was usually sent on special assignments. This meant that for this job, I was going alone. Was I concerned? Yes. Scared? Most definitely. The last 2 times I ran into anything real, it had been Lily who got me out of it. Without her, I wasn't entirely sure I could survive. Before I left, I had a few talks with Richard Broussard, one of the few other co-workers I had that I considered a friend. He was a lot more accustomed to the hunting aspect of our business. From what I heard, he was scouted after hunting a loup-garou in rural Louisiana by himself. I'm still not sure if he's brave or just lucky enough not to have died yet. He gave me a silver Bowie knife for emergencies. I don't think he considered what I'd do with it, considering I am a research agent, not a hunter. I could barely hold the thing in a single hand. I had read the dossier for this case over a few times, making sure I was well prepared for anything to come. But the concept of a hole in an attic floor isn't exactly something that answers many questions. Lily's car rolled to a stop in the driveway, engine purring its last before I stepped out. She had lent me the car whilst she was busy. The house was a slice of suburban charm with a white fence, manicured grass, and a tire swing creaking lazily in the breeze beneath a sprawling oak. The name Mackenzie was written on the side of the mailbox. The name made me shudder. Everything looked fine so far. I walked up to the front door, painted white. It almost made me chuckle by how mundane and stereotypical it all looked. I knocked on the cheap wood of the door. "Coming!" A woman's voice shouted out from inside. A few moments later, the door opened, and a woman who looked like she was in her early 30s popped her head out. "Hello?" she asked before giving me a look. I adjusted my glasses before answering. Hello, my name is Elijah Moore. I'm with the Housing Committee." "I believe you called us about a hole," I said, trying to sound as convincing as possible. The last name was fake. Moore is statistically the 17th most common last name in this part of the world, and it's a lot less memorable than the name Wiltborough, so I use it. Her eyes lit up at the mention of the hole. "Oh, of course, please come in," she said before opening the door fully. She was holding a basket of kids' clothes in one hand and was ushering me in with the other. "Geez, you guys were quick. When I broke my air conditioning, it took you guys weeks to get someone out here," she said with a smile before placing the basket on a nearby table. "Yeah, well, holes are a serious health hazard. Can't have people falling," I asked as if she knew where I was going with that. God, I don't know if anyone could have known what I was saying. "Yeah, I guess," she said awkwardly. "Oh, where are my manners?" she said before shooting out her hand. "The name is Maddie or Madison. I know it's a big ask, but could you possibly get this all sorted out quietly? My son is sleeping upstairs, and any loud noise will set him off." Yeah, sure, I can try. Just point me in the direction of the attic, and I can get to work and out of your hands in no time," I said. She led me upstairs and pulled down a small ladder that led up to the attic. I climbed up and turned on the light to find a perfectly normal hot attic, except for the large hole in the middle of it. The hole itself was maybe 3 feet wide in all directions, but incredibly deep. I couldn't see how far it went, but I went to the room below it, a study, and lo and behold, it didn't lead into there. It was definitely weird. I took some photos and some notes before heading back down the ladder. Maddie was there waiting for me. "It's weird, right? I tried throwing down some glow sticks, but they just vanish," she said with a slight smile. I nodded to her and packed up my suitcase. "Sorry, miss, but it looks like I'll have to come back to look it over a bit more. Till then, please stay out of the attic." She nodded as I said this, and I packed up for the day and headed to the motel that I've been allocated to. I didn't sleep in it. I couldn't sleep in motels for a while after what had happened. The next morning, I was back in that attic. I had mounted cameras onto poles, dropped glow sticks, and even a GPS signaler that I could track remotely. Everything disappeared eventually in the hole. Finally, I decided that I should reach in to see if I could feel anything. This goes without saying, but do not place any body part into mysterious holes found, well, anywhere, especially bathrooms for very different reasons. I don't know how else to describe it, but within the hot, muggy attic, the hole offered a small refuge. It wasn't cold, but it also wasn't hot. The temperature outside had no effect on it, as if it were a moment captured in time, unbothered by the world around it. The air coming from the hole seemingly latched onto my arm. It was a weird sensation and one that I find entirely hard to explain. I was jolted by the sudden sound of a baby crying downstairs. I'm not sure how long I spent with my hand in the hole, but it was midday by the time I got back into Lily's car. I had gone out to a local hardware store and bought some nails and planks of wood to nail over the hole, just for temporary safety reasons. When I arrived back at the house with these tools in hand, Madison stopped me. "Hey, I made you guys some coffee. I just ground up a fresh bunch." She was sat at the table behind one cup of coffee, and across from her were two more. "Thank you, Maddie, but it's just me up there. Have you seen somebody else come into this house?" I asked, confused and concerned. "Oh," she said, genuinely perplexed. "No, I've not seen anyone, but I think I thought I heard them," she said, whilst looking behind me. Focusing on remembering what she heard, she smiled back at me. "Must have been my mind playing tricks on me. You know how it is with a newborn and the nights," she said with a chuckle. I did not know, but I smiled back and took a sip of the coffee. Damn, it was good. I joined Maddie at the table and took out my notebook. "Okay, Madison, is this a good time to ask you some questions about the hole?" I asked, whilst flipping to an empty page of my scratched-up notebook. "Oh, for like insurance?" she said with a smile. "Yeah, like insurance," I answered back and nodded before taking another sip of coffee. "Oh, perfect. I was going to ask you about that, but, well, this works out just fine," she added. "So, Maddie, can you tell me when you first noticed the hole?" I asked with my pen at the ready. After a long pause, she adjusted in her chair and cleared her throat. "Well, it was only a few nights ago when I first saw it. I had put baby George down for the night and was watching some TV when I must have dozed off. It happens sometimes. Being a single parent takes something out of you, and, well, I needed my rest," she said whilst looking me in the eyes, looking for a judgment that wasn't there. "I had a dream. It must have been a dream. It was of the hole, and I heard these noises coming out from it. It felt like it was calling for me or asking for something. I don't know, Mr. Moore. By the time I woke up, it was already sunrise. The dream wouldn't leave my mind, and, well, after a few hours it got the best of me, and so I went to look," she said. "And there was the hole," I added. "Yep, now I tried to play with it, figure out what it was or how deep it was, but I can't for the life of me figure it out," she continued. "And the dream, Madison, tell me more about that," I asked, but before she could answer, baby George started to cry from upstairs. Of course, I'll just be in the attic if you need me," I added, before I was alone on the bottom floor. I hate being alone. I had decided in that moment that the next time I see Lily, I'm going to be holding a very expensive bottle of whiskey and a receipt to prove I didn't steal it. Day became night, and I took refuge in the car once again. As I tossed and turned in the back seat, I realized my mind was distracted by something. It wasn't till I fell asleep that I realized what. I was in the attic. The moon shone through the window straight onto the hole. The surrounding area was pitch black. I felt a pressure in my head that pushed me forward towards the hole. I walked towards it, and as I got closer, the moonlight grew brighter, or the darkness became darker. I couldn't say. I reached the hole, and as if someone kicked the back of my legs, I fell hard onto my knees. I stared into the black abyss for far too long. There is a saying about staring into the abyss, and it's staring back at you, and I was beginning to understand that in a literal sense. The whispers grew louder. Slowly but surely, they rose from soft-spoken to angry, and angry to a state in which I imagine whoever was speaking was forcing the words out, until a knock at the window woke me up, a police officer by the looks of it. I cracked the door open and rubbed my eyes. "Good morning, officer," I said with a yawn. "Good morning, young man. Long night?" he said with an arched eyebrow. I shrugged, and he gave me a breathalyzer and sent me on my way. I drove to the motel and had a shower, antsy about any sudden noises. After an hour or so, I arrived at the Mackenzie residence to find Madeline sat out front in a sleep robe over some pajamas. She was holding her son, and she looked like hell. "Maddie, how are you doing this morning?" I asked cautiously. She jumped when I said her name and began to sob when she saw me. "Whoa, what happened? Talk me through it," I said, resting both hands on her shoulders. "Oh God, it's the voices, Elijah. I wasn't sleeping, but I heard them. And they were screaming, Elijah, screaming for me. It wanted me to give it something, Elijah." She continued to cry. "What did it want, Maddie? Did you know what it was asking for?" I asked, whilst looking her in the eyes. She nodded her head slowly and panned her head down. She was looking at her son. My heart dropped and my stomach ached. "Listen, I'm sorry, Elijah. We can't get anyone out there at the moment. The hunting division is pretty busy today, and tonight we're torching a vampire nest. Isn't that cool?" Richard said with excitement. "Yeah, I guess that is pretty cool. Can't you spare even one hunter? You could come out just for a few hours, just for tonight, man. Come on," I pleaded, but I knew the answer. "Sorry, Unpote. Tonight's gonna be a pretty interesting night. And it's all hands on deck. Just use the knife I gave you, man," he said before hanging up. God damn it. Madison wasn't in a good state. I sent her to her sister's place, which apparently is nearby. Tonight I'd be spending the night at the Mackenzie residence, and I still didn't know what to expect. None of my notes gave me a good enough explanation. The sun was going down, and I had to lock down the house. Every light was on. The TV had my favorite sitcom on, and I had ordered a pizza. I wasn't watching the TV, but having it on made me feel better. Everything was fine until 1 a.m. That's when I could hear the whispers. I was sat in the entertainment room on the bottom level of the home. A Bowie knife laid out in front of me and every anti-paranormal tool at my disposal. Silver halide, a bag of salt. Hell, I even had a runestone on me, not as powerful as the one I had beforehand, but from what I understand, it would create a pretty durable barrier around me. An hour passes, and the words grow louder and more rage-filled. I try to ignore the part of myself that's screaming at me to run. The TV is muted now, and all I can hear are the words from the hole and the beating of my heart. That is until I hear it. "What the fuck?" I said instinctively. The doorbell at 2 a.m. I slowly crept over towards the door and pulled back the curtain. I jumped when I saw her, but standing there in a coat and pajamas was Maddie, and in her hands was baby George. I opened the door and stepped out of the house. "Maddie, this is maybe the worst time to come back here. You need to..." She cut me off before I could continue. "Elijah, don't worry. Everything is okay. Everything will be okay," she said with a smile. I realized in that moment that her eyes were extremely dilated and she looked far too calm. "Maddie, what's happening?" I said, demanding an explanation. "I can understand it now, Elijah. It isn't angry. It just wants to make a small deal. It doesn't want to make a fuss. It just wants something." She moved her coat slightly, and I could see baby George's leg poke out from inside. Dear God, I hoped he was okay. She suddenly pushed me off the stairs and into the bushes. It took me a second to find my bearings, but the sound of her sprinting up the stairs suddenly made my adrenaline kick in like never before. I launched myself to my feet and ran after her. Thankfully, she was holding George in one hand, so getting up the ladder was difficult for her. I grabbed her foot as she made it into the attic, and she tried to stomp on my fingers, and pain flared through my fingers. But I had to push past that. I pulled myself up and rolled over onto the attic floor. Maddie was standing over the hole out of breath, and in her hands was a crying George. "Please, Maddie, please don't do this. He's your son. A baby," I begged. I felt the knife by my side on my belt and grabbed the hilt. Yeah, he's just so young, pure and innocent, my beautiful boy, she said with a loving look on her face before slowly squatting down and holding the baby over the hole. Where'd you get your coffee beans from? I asked in a panicked voice. She looked up at me, genuinely confused. Excuse me? She adjusted herself slightly and wasn't leaning over the hole as much. This was stupid, but this was the best chance I had. I launched the knife, aimed at her. It fell and hit a nearby wall with a pathetic thump, which she watched slowly. What she didn't watch was me sprinting at her and tackling her to the ground and digging George out of her grasp. What are you doing? She screamed and scratched and kicked and punched me. I had managed to get the baby into my arms, and I ran for the ladder. I took one last look at Maddie, who I realized wasn't chasing us. She was kneeling by the hole with silent tears running down her face. Her left hand was sunken down into the hole, and a black, skeletal hand reached out and grabbed it in a show of comfort before she leant forward and fell in. Baby George went to his sister's, and the hole was cut out of the attic. It's in the organization's security vault, and no matter where it is or what it's leaning against, it breaks physics as we know it. I think about Maddie sometimes. Sometimes I visit the vault and look at the hole, and sometimes I dream of it. Richard told me that I did well. Lily told me that I did all that I could do, and at the end of the month I got paid. But I can't help but think that by hearing the words spoken by the thing in the hole, it dug itself into my head. I don't know. I don't like to think about it, but I can't help myself from it. All part of the job, I guess. Case 004. The Man in Our Dreams. Have you ever driven down a long highway late at night in the rain? The sound of water hitting the metallic roof and the silent purr of the engine make it almost impossible not to at least feel tired. I was in the passenger seat of Lily's car. We had just driven out into the rural country to investigate the claims of a goat man. These claims were false, but it wasn't a bad trip at all. Lily had come back from her secret assignment, and I had missed her company. I sat semi-reclined in the passenger seat, staring out at the trees passing us by and occasionally focusing on a raindrop sliding across the glass window. I had become all too comfortable sleeping in this car. I still felt weird about motels, and after my last case, I hadn't been getting the best quality sleep. Bad things are one thing, but my mind kept going back to that attic, the hole. Elijah, do you need a coffee break? Lily said as we slowed down to a crawl. She pointed out a diner up ahead, but I just waved her suggestion off. I closed my eyes and let whatever my body was telling me take effect. It was saying the word sleep. I could feel myself slip away, and for a moment I could almost hear the whispering from the hole. I could make out the details of the attic, and then suddenly it all turned to fog and drifted away, like smoke in the wind. I fell for a moment before hitting something plump and comfortable, hard. My head hit something, and I jolted up and looked around. I was in a diner, one that looked like it was from the 1950s. Everyone inside was wearing time-appropriate clothes and drinking milkshakes with cream and cherries layered on top of them. I heard the familiar sound of a bell ringing and a door opening. I shifted my eyes towards the direction of the entrance and saw a man wearing a trench coat and a fine suit. He was focused on me with a smile. "Elijah, my boy, look at you," he said. He lifted his arms in a hugging gesture before doing what I can only describe as a half-dance and half-skip over to me, and giving me a half-sided hug before sitting in the booth across from me. "It has been far, far too long since I've seen you, and look at how well you've done for yourself. Field research agent for the Redacted." He clapped his hands together and chuckled. "Truly impressive, my friend," he added. The man's dark skin shone with what must have been rain, although when I looked out the window, all I saw was dark, swirling fog. "Where are we?" I asked. I kept looking around at my surroundings. It was difficult not to take in all of the hazy imagery around us. "Oh, I'm sorry, Elijah. I thought this would be comforting for you. Most people like to dream of places they feel comfortable in," he said. He sounded genuinely apologetic, and he waved his hand out, and the people, signs, food, and furniture dissipated into fog before reforming into slightly modern variants of what they once were. "Is that better?" he asked, and I got the sense that it was genuine. "Yeah, thanks. Is this, real?" I asked, and felt stupid for asking, but he just gave me a smirk and a nod. "Depends on what you mean by real. Are you really experiencing this? Well then, yes. Are we in the realm that you consider to be the real world?" "Well then, no," he said with a chuckle. "This is a dream. I'm dreaming, right?" I said, which made him nod once again. "There you are, Elijah. See, I knew you were a smart cookie," he said, before putting his hand into the air. "Are you hungry?" A second later, fog crept up from under the table, and I jumped back. The fog swirled in front of me before forming into the shape of eggs on toast with beans. "Your favorite, right?" he said with a smile. He was right, it was my favorite. But more than that, it was perfect. The eggs were done how I liked them, and they used wholemeal instead of white bread. Even the ratio of the beans was just like I liked them. "Who the fuck are you?" I said, whilst staring the man in the eyes. He moved his hands up defensively, an odd gesture as I was pretty certain he had some level of control over the environment around us. I wasn't sure what he could do, but I knew I couldn't trust him. "Elijah. I am a friend. Seriously, have a try of the eggs. I've heard they're perfect," he said while gesturing to the plate of food that sat in front of me. I had no interest in trying them. I looked at the man for a long time. Something about him was strikingly familiar, but not in the way that you'd recognize an old friend or a lover from years before. It was like recognizing your own shadow. He had no recognizable features, and there was no real way for me to know who this was. Yet deep down, I recognized this shadow as mine. "I've seen you before," I said cautiously. The smile on the man's face grew silently, and he nodded. "A time ago, although from in here I can't really say." He chuckled before waving his hand in front of him, and fog rose up and formed into a glass mug. He lifted the mug to his lips and took a drink. The man acted like we were old friends reminiscing on the good old days. I was afraid to push further into this conversation, but I didn't see a choice. "So then, friend, what should I call you?" I said, as friendly as I could. My hand was shaking as I reached out and grabbed a side of the toast and took a bite, making a show of trust. He smiled at this. "I have been called a few things by a few people. The Dreamer, Tutu, Fantasos. But you, my friend, can simply call me Imani," he said, whilst urging me to continue to eat. "How are the eggs? Describe them to me." "They're fine, nothing too crazy," I answered, and it was met with a clap from Imani and a "God damn, I'm good." Do you know how difficult it is to replicate taste in this realm? Of course, people dream of taste, but it's been so long since I've been able to experience it that I'm going off of words, he said, looking quite pleased with himself. Well, I'll tell you what, Elijah. I don't want to hold you for any longer than I have, and you've got me in a good mood. I knew talking with you would go well, he said, pointing a finger at me. You, my friend, have been marked. Something is after you, and whatever limitations or bindings someone had placed on it are gone. It's coming, Elijah. As he said this, the image of the Shadow Man appeared in the fog outside the diner for a short second, before being engulfed by the tempest of winds. Then the whole appeared with Madison sitting next to it. That too had drifted away. Elijah, look at me, focus on what I say. This realm can be tricky to work in. It's malleable to the human consciousness. This is why I need to say this quick. They may have a foothold in you somewhere, but they aren't the things after you. Okay, what is it? I asked. He said, whilst wiggling his finger at me. He placed a folded piece of paper onto the table and flashed a smile. When you open this, you'll know. But I need to know that when I call on you, you shall answer for whatever I need, he said. His mouth was smiling, but his eyes told a different story. And you just expect me to trust you, some random psychic who jumped into my dream and is holding information over my head, I said with a slightly raised voice. Everyone in the diner stopped to stare, and with a squint of Imani's eyebrow, they melted into fog before forming into the furniture around them. Elijah, don't be stupid. You're asking the wrong questions to the right person. This realm doesn't have space for people like psychics. Psychics manipulate your realm with their mind. Well, guess what? This realm is constantly manipulated by the collective power of dreams. Your psychics have no power here, nor do your gods, nor do those entities coming for you. Everything dreams, Elijah. Everything except for me, he said. Before pushing the paper to me, I held it in my hand and opened it. I shot awake in Lily's car, and she swerved slightly in the lane.
Fucking Christ, Elijah,
she said whilst correcting the trajectory of the car. I didn't respond. I was too focused on the image in my head. The paper didn't have words written down on it, and yet I took it in all the same. The image was of my childhood backyard. It was night. I stood seemingly alone, but I knew there was another there, a man. No, that isn't an accurate term for whatever it was. That thing stood in my bushes, taller than a man should be and pale enough to glow in the dark. Its smile should have cut its cheeks open, but they stayed sealed. William Gray, my boogeyman, my monster underneath my bed, the entity hunting me, is now free. Hello there, hope you enjoyed the video. These stories are part of a series of case files. You can check the playlist on screen or in the description for more. You can also visit the author's Reddit page if you'd like to read some of the cases. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. And as always, stay creepy, and see you in the next story.